Hey guys, welcome back. Thought I'd go ahead and make another video and do a bit another reflection. I'm doing some philosophical reading, so I thought I'd reflect over a little bit about that. Well, I find philosophy important for me, studying it in the academic sense, because it really helped me to gain a lot more, to become a lot better of a deep thinker than I was before, especially in the area of like critical thinking, you know, and that's, I think, important for these days. It's really, a lot of people, I think, don't know how to think through things that, in a critical sense, taking things step by step. But beyond just the practical use of it, I found it very enlightening and very useful. Now, I've personally studied a lot more of Western philosophy than Eastern philosophy, so can't really speak on their end. But it's pretty different. So I'm just speaking from my experience as somebody who studied Western philosophy. So, what is philosophy? First off, you know, that term gets thrown around a lot, and people don't really know what it means. I don't think. So philosophy, in its most simple sense, is can be broken down into where its roots are from, which is Greek. The two words that it's built off of is philo, or philo, one of the two, which just simply means love, and Sophia, which means wisdom. And so it essentially means the love of wisdom. And that, in its most simple sense, is what philosophy is. It's a love for wisdom. Like asking questions and wanting to learn more about why the world is the way it is. Why is it this way and not that way? You know, for example, why do things change? And why do they stay the same? And philosophy, it's pretty difficult to get into initially. There's a steep learning curve going into philosophy, like, because it's not easy to read initially, but the more you read it, the more you begin to become more familiar with that kind of way of thinking. It really helps to cement that. So really the only way to start doing philosophy is to start doing it. But that's not easy to go into. So for example, well, I think more of a practical thing would be that whenever you go into reading and studying philosophy, it's better to take things slowly, especially in the beginning, because it's more about getting used to that way of thinking. And if you speed read through like something like Aristotle's Metaphysics, you're not going to understand anything you read, especially with Aristotle, who writes so dense. But if you take it just maybe a paragraph at a time, really sit with it, and chew on it, and really sink your teeth into what's being said, and sitting with that, you'll get a lot more out of philosophy than just reading through it like any other class, like speed reading through it, or any other kind of book. So, another, I think, useful tip, too, in getting into philosophy is learning how to take notes while you're reading, because it helps you to process down what you're what you're reading, and helps you think through all that they're saying, that the philosopher was saying, and it helps you get used to that style of thinking, like putting it into your own words. And tied to that is also just writing short, maybe personal essays or reflections that can help with that. So, because you're taking the information that you picked up and you're putting it into your own words, maybe into a simpler explanation. There are various ways of note taking that you could probably find through university websites and the like. Now, there are different schools of philosophy, just like any other kind of field of study. Of course, maybe the most famous would be like metaphysics, because everybody likes to throw around that term but actually doesn't know what it means. Now, metaphysics, in the most simple sense, is the study of being in itself, like as in the very act of existence. So it's not just like a thing, but why does that thing exist? Or how, in what way does that thing exist? Now that's more of a medieval and ancient philosophy kind of way of thinking about metaphysics. I've read that more modern and contemporary thinkers have broadened the definition quite a bit to include other things, but I specialize in ancient and medieval philosophy, particularly in the area of Thomistics. So, to me, metaphysics is the study of being as such. Then you also have something like epistemology. Now, epistemology is the study of how do we know what we know? Meaning, how does our mind work with truth and the intellect? How do we process information? How do we gain new ideas? How do we learn about the nature of a thing? It's things like that that epistemology deals with. And there's also philosophical aesthetics, which is a more recent school of philosophy within the past couple of centuries, I think, at least from what I read. And it focuses on the study of what beauty is. What makes a thing beautiful, as opposed to not being beautiful? How do we perceive beauty? Is beauty in everything or only in some things? Things like that. Let's see, what else is there in the philosophical studies? I'm trying to think of just the broad category. Well, there's ethics. Ethics is the study of the good itself and how we go to attain that good. So, I know particularly with ethics, you want to be careful with how philosophers define their definitions. Because most philosophers agree that that the good for man is happiness. That's something that all men desire to know or to achieve is happiness. But the way in which that particular philosopher might define happiness will vary greatly. For example, Thomas Aquinas defines happiness as the attainment of beatitude, or blessedness, holiness, things like that. While Aristotle defines happiness as the attainment of virtue, virtue meaning the means between an excess and defect of a thing. While an epistemologist will define happiness as mere pleasure. Or, not epistemologist, sorry, a utilitarian would define happiness as nothing but mere pleasure. So you have to be careful, and this goes broadly with philosophy in general. You need to know how the philosopher defines his terms to really understand what he's saying. Because a philosopher will use a term but means something different than what you may think it does. And that comes part of with that critical thinking I'm talking about. So, So philosophy, like I said, it really helped me expand my mind and to think more deeply about different things, particularly when it comes to today's issues and discussions. And as I said, I follow more the school of Thomism. Just find that that holds the most truth. But I find that there's every philosopher has some bit of truth in him in what he's writing, but you have to be able to distinguish the truth from where they err. Uh, One of the reasons I like St. Thomas Aquinas so much is because he was a great synthesizer. He took philosophies from all different sorts of people, from all different cultures and time periods, and he managed to synthesize them into his own philosophy. So he takes something from Plato, takes something from Aristotle, which was relatively recently discovered in his time period in the West, because most of his Aristotle's works weren't translated into Latin at that until that period, where it came through Arabic philosophers, was translated into Arabic, which then made it into the West and translated in Latin, which was the scholarly language at the time. But he also took some from Arabic philosophers, and even, I think, at least one Jewish philosopher, Moses Maimonides. So he managed to synthesize all these ideas into his own philosophy, which he also mixes into his theology as well, which is the Catholic approach, faith and reason, philosophy and theology. It was called, it still is today, in the Catholic world, philosophy is called the handmaiden to theology. So, and I kind of am inspired by that approach to philosophy, seeing the good ideas, even in the modern philosophers and contemporaries, and seeing where they're right, where they point out a truth, and then judging, okay, what point do they take it too far? Truth from falsehood. The study of philosophy is ultimately the study for truth. Modern science sprouted from a field of philosophy called natural philosophy. So Aristotle, his physics were used all the way up until Isaac Newton, just to show you like that kind of perspective and how science developed over time. So, and in some ways it still is, and you'd be surprised by how much he got right, but also where he gets some things wrong too. Different technology of the time, different understanding of the world. They didn't quite have the same level of insight that we could have today with our new technology and things like that. So, but honestly, my biggest advice to anybody interested in philosophy is just take it slow, take it easy. There's no need to rush unless you're studying it academically, but even then, in my opinion, it's better to take things slower until it becomes easier for you to read. Then you can start going maybe a bit quicker. So, because it requires discipline to really be able to understand it. And that's part of the virtues of studying philosophy in any field of knowledge. So, philosophy really is the art of thought. It's the art of thinking, the art of insight. And it all begins with wonder. Why? What? How? Anybody can be a philosopher. It just takes practice, takes patience, and takes time, and ultimately takes some leisure. Leisure meaning free time that you can devote to studies and improving yourself. So I thank you all for tuning in. And if you like it, please like it. If you don't, dislike it. You can leave your own thoughts down in the comments. to see, and let me know what you think about it. Do you like philosophy? Do you see it as completely pointless? What's your thoughts? So, uh, if you would like to see more of my personal reflections, I thinking I probably might keep it academic, but I also like to talk more personally about my personal life too much. I won't try to reveal too many details. So, again, thank y'all for watching, and I hope to see y'all on the next one. All right, bye bye.